Live from Phoenix, Arizona, you're watching Extraordinary Lovers TV. Every week, we cover topics that transform the world and ourselves through pleasure. And now, your hosts, best-selling author and international Tantra teacher, Laurie Handlers, and creator of the Extraordinary Lovers Experience and sex and happiness coach, Michael Gibson.
Hey, gang. Hello, everybody. It is so good to be here. And obviously, Laurie's not here today. Oh, man. Well, I'll give you the reason for that in just a moment. But it is so good to be here. It is Friday. Oh, gosh, what is it? March 26th. It's time for Extraordinary Lovers, a live stream for lovers. And we've got a topic today that I think is going to be very controversial, interesting. And I'm really hoping that the chat's going to be involved today because really it's going to take all of us to sort through this thing called the patriarchy. So let me tell you what's happening with Laurie. Laurie is actually in Austin, Texas right now. She is a lead faculty, as many of you know, of the International School of Temple Arts, ISTA, and she is leading a level 1 in Austin, Texas with some of our dear friends and her mentors and some amazing people. Brianna Kribire is there. Johnny Vajra is there. My brother in arms, Frank Mondese, is there, and also another beloved, dear, sweet friend and just an amazing woman, Crystal Dawn Morris. So these are the people who are leading and involved and active in Austin, Texas, and I'm giving a shout out to every one of you because this is an important work that's being done. So welcome again to Extraordinary Lovers TV. And I have a few things that I kind of want to preset this before we get into this conversation, because there's a lot of controversy around this topic, the patriarchy, which, you know, as many of you know, or maybe you don't know, that there is this thing. It's an ideology. It's not necessarily a belief system. It's more of an ideology, and it is pervasive throughout the world. I would say it's more pervasive in Western culture. In fact, it could be called an overarching, what was the word that Jordan Peterson used? He called it the patriarchy being this, domineering or like totalitarian thing that happens in culture. And I just want to address it. I think it's an important part of how we interact and relate to each other as men and women. I mean, there are two genders on the planet. And I'm not talking about how you gender identify. What I'm talking about is there are two biological genders on the planet. And they are male and female. And then we have the hermaphrodites. Let's not leave them out. And that is where you're physically born with all of the reproductive organs in some form or fashion, or maybe even partial. But those people exist too. They are on our planet. And so that's a gender that is a rarity, and yet it's still a gender, and it's called hermaphrodite. So, but built up around male and female are these, ideologies, and one of them is called the patriarchy. Another one's called the matriarchy. But the patriarchy seems to be a pretty devastating ideology for mankind, for the most part. There are good things that come out of everything. I mean, if you listen to Jordan Peterson, you're going to hear him say that, yes, the patriarchy is, definitely a terrible thing. It has created and developed over time in Western culture some pretty horrific results. And yet it also has done other things, and he gives all kinds of great analogies for that. And yet I disagree with him on a number of levels. And I don't propose to have a debate with this man. I don't think I'm close to his, scholarly ability, but I do have opinions. And so really it's important to understand what is the patriarchy. And there are a couple of different views on it, but we're going to take a look at it. We'll look at it historically. We'll look at it in analogies, and we'll look at it in sort of ways that I experienced growing up, as well as ways I have experienced in raising my own children, and how that has caused some pretty terrible results and even devastation over our own history, our human history. So I do want to, number one, celebrate humanity. Humanity has come a long way from when things were very much a man's world. Let's not get it, let's not get it wrong here. It's still pretty much a man's world, and that in and of itself is the patriarchy. So I guess this tangent that I'm going to go on today has to do more with how do we resolve these problems that exist in our culture today, and by looking at where does it come from, how does it stem, and how do we resolve it together, male, female, hermaphroditic, all the different ways. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you a video that I pulled up, which was has a really simple explanation of what this is. And I'm going to share that with you just now. Hold on a moment. Let me get it going. Oh, come on.
Patriarchy is a word that scholars, and in particular feminist scholars, use to describe the ways that the world is organized by ideas about gender, and in particular ideas about men and women. Patriarchy says that men should be in charge and women should follow along and do what men want to do. And so there are lots of ways that patriarchy shapes our lives. I think one of the most clear examples of patriarchy is kind of the idea of the family, or the idea of the marriage. And so inside the word patriarchy is the Latin root pater, which means father. And in a patriarchal family, the father is at the top of the family structure. So the father's in charge, maybe the mother's up there, but she's kind of following along, and then the kids are down below. And so that kind of structure might get replicated in lots and lots of other institutions. So if the little family, if the single unit of the family is patriarchal, with the dad on top and the mom underneath kind of following along, then a patriarchal institution that's not the family would look the same way. So a patriarchal government structure would say the men should lead and the women should follow along. Or in the late 18th century, when the United States was founded, we had a patriarchal government structure because women couldn't vote. So the men could lead, the men could tell the women what to do, and the women had no voice. They couldn't vote. They had no choice really but to follow along. Other structures like that might be like businesses or work environments in which the men are the bosses and the women are fulfilling other kinds of duties that are also important but are not valued as highly. So we sometimes see patriarchy through the structure itself, and sometimes we see patriarchy through the kinds of practices that happen in the place. So you might see a situation in which it seems from the outside like the men and the women all have the similar kinds of jobs and similar amounts of power in the space. But if the men actually get to do whatever they want, and the women kind of have to tolerate bad behavior or tolerate being called names or things like that, then even though it looks from the outside like everything's hunky-dory, actually it's a patriarchal structure because the men still have more power than the women.
Yeah, this is a good example of what it is, and I'm going to cancel that. You know, the men are in charge. I mean, if you want to take it down to the very simplest explanation of it, the patriarchy essentially puts men in charge of everything, and it diminishes or it actually tends to not just diminish, but also to hold back or suppress and oppress women, children. There are, the patriarchy can be seen in anywhere where you see it's, said, well, that's just the way it is. Like, we were all born on this planet, and we all, essentially came to this planet from the same, way, in the same way. And it's interesting to me that we don't get a vote early on in our lives when we arrive here as to how we want this world to run. We don't get a choice in that. And that's the interesting thing about this, is that we're born into these systems. And when do we ever take a moment, and here's your opportunity today, to take a moment and think about it and say, is this really how I want things to go? I mean, is this really how I want it? Is this the way my culture, I would set it up? Is this the way I would set this up in my world, to have a culture that works this way, where there is one gender who is premier and prime, and there are sub, genders, or if you don't reach a certain age, if you're a boy, you're still less than a man, and you still are less than, and you're diminished and suppressed. And it's really weird because this is not how I think human beings, any of us, would want it to be. We'd want there to be equality everywhere, and it's seen in a lot of different cultures, but there are some cultures now that we've discovered and understand where women are more highly regarded than men, and those are peaceful. You know what I mean? They're peaceful societies, or peaceful cultures, rather. In some Native American cultures, that was the way it was. Women owned the land. Women were responsible for providing the wisdom and passing things on. Men took on the role of hunting and fighting wars, or protecting the tribe, or protecting the unit, and so they often died off, and so it was left to the women of that culture to pass on the knowledge and wisdom. So it's really strange how in our culture today, and I don't think it's strange. I think it's strange to ask the question, why is that? Why is it this way? How have you experienced the patriarchy in your own life? How have you experienced this idea that men are more important and have more privilege? That's the word I'm looking for. Male privilege. It's like white privilege, male privilege, where men are essentially able, through their ability to earn more than women. Women currently make 77 cents for every dollar that a man makes. I don't know, for the same job, for the exact same job. And that's just not fair. It's unequal. That's inequality at its most blatant. And that is also an indication of that's just the way things are. This is the patriarchy. When you hear that level of, or when you hear that spoken that way, or when you hear it articulated that way, you're dealing with the patriarchy. The patriarchy has been around for thousands of years, where men were placed in this high privilege of society, and they made the rules. We made the rules. We got paid the money. We did all the things that, including starting wars and doing things that made no sense other than to, boost our egos and to be self-important. And women were not given the honors that they were due. Here's a good example. No, that just popped out of nowhere. Here's a good example of a historical example of the patriarchy in action. And that is Joan of Arc. I don't know if you know the story of Joan of Arc. Just a short, dissertation on what happened. Joan of Arc was inspired. She was a French young girl at the time, and she was inspired at the age of 16 to go and fight and lead the French armies against the British, I believe it was. And she defeated the British. I mean, she solidly defeated the British. She was an amazing strategist. She was just, brilliant. And when she came home, it was discovered that she was a girl. And so rather than bestowing upon her all the honors of a conquering general or, a wise statistician, being given all the, the true honors that someone like that should have, she was burned at the stake, murdered for disrupting this ecosystem called the patriarchy. She was put to death by the church and by the state. And so the patriarchy exists in both the church and the state. And I know this is a very heavy topic. It's not very fun to talk about, but it's something that really does impact us today. Not in, centuries past stories about things that happened, but this happens to us today. And one of the things that I think is really important, especially in our families, is to understand if the patriarchy exists, how to shift off of that and actually become more egalitarian in our ways of being. Egalitarianism really is that we all share everything equally and we are equal. That's a fair tenet of what an egalitarian society is. Everybody shares everything equally, and we also are honored as equals. So how to bring that into a family? Because, when I was growing up, one of the things that I learned very early on was that my emotions would make me weak. Boys don't cry. Here's an example of it. That boys don't cry. Only girls cry. Why? Don't act like a girl. Here's an even harsher way to say it. Don't be a little bitch. That was said to me anytime that I cried or if I showed emotions. Upset. When I'd get angry and pout, don't be a little bitch. And I'm like, I look at that and I listen to that and I go, wow, that still exists today. And it exists probably in just as harsh a way as it did when I was growing up. Now I'm 52, so I would have to ask the younger audience, hey, what's it like for you today? Are we still telling that same old story? Boys don't cry. Be tough, be a leader. Which it's not a problem. I mean, be a leader. Be tough. Yeah, definitely be tough. But boys do cry, and our emotions are important just as much as our ability to be tough, to hold the line, to be masculine. Here's another thing that I think it's impacted by this. Hey, Miss Jones from Canada, welcome. Hi, how are you? So we're talking a little bit about the patriarchy today, and I'm just sharing a little bit of my past, and this is also something that I taught my kids, like my son. My son, I was hard on him, and unduly hard on him because I wanted him to be tough. I wanted him to be a leader. I wanted him to be stoic, and I wanted him to be successful in life. And that's what I thought it took. I thought it took, being tough and being, not somebody who cries. And my son did cry. And what's really sad is that, after having had this kind of an opening up for me to understand what really the damage that's being done by the patriarchy today in our society today, what that's like, how that's being perpetrated in his family as well. And so I want to stop it everywhere we can, including my family, my grandkids. I don't want them to grow up feeling like, they can't have emotions. One of the things that I learned from Laurie that was probably one of the most liberating was that I can have emotions, I can honor my anger, and I can deal with those emotions in a very powerful way. Yeah, that's true. Equating emotions to a lack of toughness is the correlation that we need to stop making. Exactly. So you can be tough and still have emotions. You can be tough and still be compassionate. And I think one of the things that the patriarchy does is it removes compassion from men, and it inhibits our ability to really be authentic and to be vulnerable. So The question is, well, how does this happen? Well, if you're born in, if you're born in water and you're a fish, you're not aware that there's air until you leave the water. So I think that this is one of the things that we have to do is just become aware of it. Like, it's real. It does happen. And it happens sometimes without us even knowing it. So I had an experience recently where a good friend of mine treated another man friend of mine with, it was just disdain. It was terrible, terrible the way he treated him. It was unfair. He was really blocking him from being able to express himself in, a very important space that we were in, which I was broken by. I was like, I cannot believe this is happening right now. And it was. And when I expressed it, I said, this sounds like the patriarchy. Anytime a man begins to block another man or suppress someone else, whether it's a man or a woman or anyone else, because that person, either it's ego or it's a desire to be thought of as first, right, elevated, that would happen. And I said, God, that sounds just like the patriarchy. That sounds like, without even knowing it, it's happening. And it got addressed. And it was really powerful the way it got addressed. And this brother really came around and said, yeah, I get it. It happened to me by another person in this organization. And that, just the realization of that, seeing it for what it was, he was able to then change and shift and go, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to suppress people. I'm not going to hold people back. One of the first things that we could do as a society is demand that women are paid the exact amount that men are paid, or more. I mean, well, maybe not more, but definitely pay at least $1 for dollar for what men are paid, and that everybody be accepted and considered equal. Now, I found this video on YouTube recently that it hit me pretty hard. And I don't know if you know who Natalie Portman is. She's one of my favorite actors. And she she gave a talk. I believe it is at a variety dinner, and yeah, it's pretty powerful. I want to share it with you because she shares some important things that I think everybody should think about. And she gives you some really good statistics on this as well. Give me just a second. I'm going to pull this up for us. Here we go. And listen very closely.
Thank you, Gina, for that generous introduction. As I hope most of you in this room already know, Gina is the most talented actress, the fiercest activist, the kindest heart, the most brilliant mind, and she's also a director and a boxer. So just keep watching her. She's the best. Tiffany, Emma, Regina, Lena, I would be humbled just to shake your hands, not to mention share this honor and this stage with you. I admire each of you so, so deeply. Thank you for the work that you do and that you're exposing us to more today. And to Emma in particular, your courage at your age after such a traumatic moment to have done what you and your peers have done has given me and given all of us hope for the future, that one day I can drop my kid off at school without imagining the possibility of the nightmare that you and way too many kids have experienced in this country. So thank you so much personally. So, how are you all doing? Are you tired? I am so tired. Oh my God, my son asked me the other day why it looked like I'd been wearing goggles. I was like, baby, Kavanaugh, I don't sleep, okay. Anyway, it's been a rough couple weeks, but we've also had an incredible week at Time's Up, the organization I'm here to talk about, because this week we welcomed our first president and CEO, Lisa Borders. Lisa Lisa is coming to us after heading the WNBA, and she is a brilliant, compassionate, strategic leader with vast experience in business, activism, and government, and we are so lucky and so grateful to have her come guide our path. Thank you. So I came to the first Time's Up meeting almost exactly 1 year ago after the shattering reports by Megan Twohey, Jodi Kantor, and Ronan Farrow were published about Harvey Weinstein. I had heard the stories, of course, about Harvey, like we all had, but was horrified to learn the extent of his abuse. However, the part of the story I had never considered before was how many women were forcibly removed from our industry because of his retaliatory behavior. The articles in the New York Times and the New Yorker, as you all know, detailed his active character assassination of the women he assaulted, telling directors that the actresses he had abused were difficult or crazy and not to work with them. Harvey's lawyer, David Boyce, signed contracts with spy firms to surveil the women who reported his crime to try to make them out as whores and track their movements. He did this, as many harassers and assaulters do, to take power away from their victims, because if they have less work, they have less money, and then they have less power, and eventually they have less credibility and less reputation, and again, less power to get him in trouble for the crimes he committed. And it's working. Harvey is still free today. And yesterday, the New York County DA, Cy Vance, just dismissed one of the cases against him because our legal system and our culture protects the perpetrators of sexual violence, not its victims. Harvey Weinstein, the man whose name has become synonymous with serial rapist, might never suffer any legal consequences because of that. As Jodi Kantor noted, Weinstein's abuse was so pervasive that a whole generation of actresses had been pushed out of our industry and had been deprived of decades of work and the payment that accompanies it. But what other women in our industry and in other industries have been silenced and shut out in this way? I had always wondered why there was still unequal representation in nearly every industry, and particularly in positions of leadership and power, when graduate schools have been consistently enrolling equal amounts of men and women. I wondered, why do women graduate 50-50 from law schools, and yet they make up only 20% of law firm partnerships? Why do women graduate 50-50 from all business schools and yet make up only 10.6% of the Fortune 500 boards and 4.8% of Fortune 500 CEOs? Or in our industry, women are graduating 50-50 from film schools and only 11% of the top 250 films last year were directed by women. So there's this theory that a lot of people say that women drop out of the workforce to focus on motherhood, or because the workplace isn't conducive enough to rearing children. And I used to believe that explanation, but it always seemed suspicious. Like, a woman spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on law school and all the time and hard work to graduate and all the hours and stress to pass the bar, and then works for years at a law firm, and then gives up her 6- or 7-figure job that she loves and has invested so much time into because she never considered she might need to find childcare for her kid, and a woman who can probably easily afford childcare. It was confusing, but I bought it because, well, I don't know, I'm a sheep. But now I want to dispel that myth. First of all, there are too many women who either don't choose to have children, do not yet have children, or have grown children to account for the gaping lack of women in leadership positions in almost every industry. Second, there are many professions that might be considered incompatible with motherhood that are nearly all female. Like, think about gynecology. Gynecology is one of the most time-consuming, emotionally intensive fields of medicine, and they're on call around the clock. My dad's a gynecologist, so I remember, like, late at night, him getting called and running to the hospital. Today, almost all gynecologists are women, and many of them have kids. So what is this rumor about women not being able to do hard jobs and have kids at the same time? In gynecology, there's a unique demand for females. Women are asking for other women to do the job. So that affects hiring. Also, women are the primary people that the doctors have to deal with, so you have to assume that harassment and assault goes way down. So if there's a lesson to be learned from our vagina doctors, it's that increased demand for women and increased physical and emotional safety on the job women will flock to that field that is emotionally and intellectually intense, and also that is incredibly time-consuming. And similarly, in our business, people make the argument that we see so few female directors and DPs and camera departments and VFX supervisors, like every job, because set life isn't conducive to family life. Well, what about the hair and makeup and wardrobe departments? They're like entirely female, and they figure out how to work on movies and TV shows and take care of their families if they have chosen to have families. So it's much more likely for a woman to stay in a job for her children than to leave for her children. Consider all the women in the restaurant industry or domestic workers who sometimes work many jobs at once in order to support their kids. So let's stop saying that women are choosing to drop out of the workforce because of their families. That's wrong. It's wrong. Of course, there are women who have a personal preference for being full-time parents, and that is a beautiful and admirable choice, and way harder than working all the time, in my opinion, and unpaid. But not like all the women who should be in the leadership positions who are not there. And sure, sets and offices in every workplace can improve a lot when it comes to helping working parents, both male and female, allowing more family leave, creating spaces at work for daycares or preschools, creating reasonable work hours, post-work expectations so people can live their lives. But gynecologists don't have longer maternity leave or daycare at work, and they're an all-female profession now practically. So let's not say that these are the reasons women are leaving the workforce. Let's be clear. The reason women in nearly every industry are not represented in powerful positions is because women are being discriminated against or retaliated against for hiring and for promotion. When they do get the jobs, they are often being harassed and assaulted, and they are being paid less than their male counterparts, all of which coerce self-preserving women into finding safer options for themselves and different ways to feel valued. Many women are further oppressed by intersections with other marginalized identities, whether by sexual orientation, race, age, class, religion, physical ability, and are subject to multiple avenues of discrimination and harassment at work at once. And then if they try and report it, there's often a second harassment, and their reputations are smeared, their future hiring is jeopardized, and they are further harassed. So that is why our first action at Time's Up was to start the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund with the National Women's Law Center. Because women need to put food on the table, and in order to do so, they need to be able to do their work in a safe, equitable, and dignified environment. In its first year, our Time's Up Legal Defense Fund has served more than 3,500 people, from workers at McDonald's, to prison guards, to military personnel, to women in our own industry who have faced gender-based harassment, discrimination, coercion, and assault. Recently, our lawyers helped Melanie Kohler triumph against Brett Ratner and his lawyer Marty Singer. Pay attention to who you're hiring as your lawyers, who tried to use Brett's enormous financial advantage over her to legally bully her into silence. Because of our lawyers, Melanie did not have to retract her claims of assault against him, and he dropped his case of defamation because he saw that she could not be bullied legally just because he has hundreds of millions of dollars and she does not. At Time's Up, we want all people, men, women, and those who identify as neither and both, to lead the charge to make hiring more fair, make wages more equitable, and make the workplace environment safe and dignified for all. We now have Time's Up chapters in tech, in finance, in advertising, in journalism, in medicine, and we have sister organizations among restaurant workers, domestic workers, and farm workers who organized far before we did. We are thousands of women across multiple industries internationally joining together to make the same demands of the world. So what can you do? First, money. You can give or you can raise money for the Legal Defense Fund. Second, gather. Meet with other women and see what changes you want to make. Through Time's Up or On Your Own, gathering has been the central principle of what we do and has created every action we have taken. Third, listen. If any group you're in has people who only look like you, change that group. It's an awakening experience to hear from women who have different experiences of marginalization. Fourth, demand. The women in this room are the most powerful women in our industry. All you in this room have the power to negotiate for equal pay or grant equal pay or popularize equal pay in our culture. Be embarrassed if everyone in your workplace looks like you. Pay attention to physical ability, age, race, sexual orientation, gender identity, and make sure you've got all kinds of experiences represented. Fifth, gossip well. Stop the rhetoric that a woman is crazy or difficult. If a man says to you that a woman is crazy or difficult, ask him, what bad thing did you do to her? That's a code. That's a code word. He is trying to discredit her reputation. Make efforts to hire people who've had their reputations smeared in retaliation. Sixth, don't be shy. Don't shy away from consequences for those who abuse their power. Those who abuse power are not going to have a change of behavior out of the goodness of their hearts. They are motivated by self-interest, and they will only change their behavior if they have to worry they will lose what they care about. Seventh, and this is a united challenge to everyone in this room, tell a new story. What if we took a year off from violence against women? What if for 1 year, everyone in this room, just 1 year, does everything in their power to make sure that all the entertainment produced from this room doesn't depict a rape or murder of a woman? And the projects you write, produce, direct, act, package, market, do not harm women this year. Let's see how that goes. So I want to leave off with a reminder that our family of animals, mammals, is named after us, women, because of our mammary glands. Yes, the most remarkable thing about our whole type of animal is our boobs. We know that, men know that, and babies definitely know that. In fact, at our first Time's Up meeting, I was breastfeeding my daughter during the meeting in a room that not only allowed it, but welcomed it and applauded it. But anyway, our boobs are amazing, and there's a message in our mammary glands. Many men are behaving like we live in a zero-sum game, that if women get the respect, access, and value they deserve, that men will lose theirs. But we know the message of the mammaries. The more milk you give, the more milk you make. The more love you give, the more love you have. And the same can be said of fire. When you light someone else's torch with your own, you don't lose your fire, you just make more light and more heat. So my last challenge to everyone in this room is to spread your fire. Use your fire to light other women's torches and make more light and more heat for all of us. If every powerful woman in this room pledges to hire 3 women in jobs this year that women don't usually get, directors, cinematographers, VFX supervisors, composers, stunt coordinators, board members, I mean, like, all the jobs are jobs that women don't usually get. Just pick 3 jobs that you get to choose and light a woman's torch. That light will multiply and the heat will intensify for all of us. You all pledge with me. Love you.
I absolutely love her. And you can all see why. She's amazing. She deserved that, by the way, big time. So, continuing this conversation, I think what I want to do is I really want to, let me get back here. Let me do that. Yeah, I really want to, I want to tackle this in a way that that has us look at, well, okay, yes, the patriarchy has created this environment, this ecosystem of life. And there are some things that she said that were really important. One of the things I recommend is get connected to timesupnow.org. You know, your time and your treasure really can help to change things and to turn things around, because a lot of the power that exists today is a patriarchal power. It's found in currency or money. But if we have the money to be able to protect, and to be able to bring, these kinds of lawsuits and things like that, that a Harvey Weinstein would not happen again. I think that's an important step in the right direction. But the other thing is being conscious of it. And when it shows up, to really be able to look at it and say, okay, well, I think that's the patriarchy, and understanding what we can do that would shift that. What do you think, and what are some of the experiences you had around the patriarchy, which really shows up as just something just unfair? It's not, there's no justice in it. It doesn't make any sense. The lack of justice of, Joan of Arc is a good example to start with. But what are some examples that you can show, and what are some ways that we can turn that around? Because this is a conversation that really needs to be had. And I'm up to have it because I want to change myself. I want to change who I'm interacting with, which are mostly men. I mean, I coach men, and I want to be able to take these ideas and to make sure that they get into the heads of the men that I'm coaching. So I'm looking to you, chat, to share with me some ideas that you have around turning this patriarchy around, or at least identifying it, and then being able to take steps to mitigate the damage that could be done. And this is going to take a little bit of mental effort here, but I want us to at least start this conversation because I think it's important. Now, some of you know that Laurie is the CEO of LaurieHandlers.com. She's my boss, believe it or not. I brought Extraordinary Lovers TV up in a meeting, in a Team Laurie meeting. You were there, Chrissy. I brought up Extraordinary Lovers TV in a team meeting, and it was so great. Laurie and Brianna, both very powerful women and leaders of this organization, but Laurie herself said, I like the idea. I think we could do something fun with it. And so, she said, what do I have to do? And I said, don't worry about it. All you got to do is show up. I'll make it really easy for you. But, she helped me, or she really gave us this opportunity to use this platform to be able to share in a safe space the things that we love to talk about, which is relationships and sex and relating between men and women, and relating between couples, regardless of whether you're cis male, cis female, and all the other flavors of that. Regardless of that, being able to really relate to each other in a way that's honoring and loving and caring. And so that's why this TV show's here. Thankfully, because Laurie said, yeah, let's do it. But I want to mention another very powerful woman who helps me with this show, and that's Chrissy. And she is known as Exo Worthy Warrior. Yeah. And she is a very powerful woman. She is also very involved in how this show operates. She makes sure that everybody that comes on the show, the guests that we have, that we know about them, that we have all their information, and we have a good good relationship with them. So yeah, there's a good one. The ability to identify one's own internal male privilege and misogyny is a good place to start. Yeah, so male privilege is definitely one of those things, in misogyny which is actually evidence of male privilege. Misogyny is evidence of male privilege. I'll say it that way. And we know people who are misogynists, who are blatantly misogynists, like Donald Trump. And so many more people, men that we know in the public eye, who have taken advantage of women openly or privately. I mean, people have lost their jobs after the Me Too movement started, and then Time's Up also started outing people like Matt Lauer. These are people, who had for many, many years been under the patriarchy, under the male privilege that we have, just by virtue of the fact that we're male, could do things that are like unbelievable And when women would say, "Hey, you can't do that to me. Stop it," we would say they're crazy or difficult to work with. And like, I can't even imagine what that would be like on the reverse, right? Like if a woman was doing that to us and we're like, "No, don't do that," and she'd be like, "Oh, well, you're difficult to work with," and then I could never work again. Imagine what would happen, right? It's mind blowing. So yeah, I feel kind of I don't want to say helpless. It just feels like such a big topic to try to unpack, and then also try to find ways to change. Like, I don't know, Gandhi was able to change a lot in his culture, and for all the reasons that he had. But how do we change? How do we become the Gandhi here? That's my question. That's what I'm interested in. That's what I want to find out from you. So, thank you, Chrissy, for that. Super, super important. Yes, male privilege. So, I've given a couple of examples of male privilege. Does anybody else have any other ideas about male privilege? Do, 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 do. Hey, what's up, Andy? How you doing, brother? It's good to see you. Good to have you back here. Yeah, Andy, you're from we're doing great. We're talking about a pretty difficult topic today. It's the patriarchy and the devastation of the patriarchy in our modern culture and how it impacts us. There are a couple of videos that I've already shown, and you can go back and watch the replay if you like, that had a couple of really interesting videos. One was on what is the patriarchy, how does it operate in our culture today, and what are some of the damages, and what are some of the things that we could see in the past. Obviously, the patriarchy finds itself, or we can detect it in a lot of different ways. And one of the easiest ways, I think, really is in our politics. I think something like 18 or 19% of all of our politicians are women. It's overwhelmingly male. Does that mean it's a patriarchy involved? Well, maybe. Women are paid 77 cents on the dollar of every man that's paid $1. Is that the patriarchy? You got to kind of wonder. And then if you fit all of these things together, men are the head of the household. This is a religious thing. Whereas in Christianity, I mean, you guys don't know this, but I'm actually an ordained minister from a church here in Arizona. And one of the things that I remember learning and teaching in Bible college was that men are the head of the house and a woman is to be subject unto him. She's to remain covered. She is not to teach a man. Women are not to teach men. That's the patriarchy. That comes right out of your Bible, and there's so much more. Like if you go into the Old Testament, oh my gosh, it gets even worse. The patriarchy also allows for slavery in the Bible. Now, I'm not just picking on the Bible, okay? There are a lot of other books that we could go to and see the patriarchy embedded in there, which tells us, maybe a man wrote this. You know what I mean? It's like maybe a man wrote that book. So there's lots of good things in the Bible. I'm not picking on the Bible just to pick on the Bible, but to say that, there's some stuff in there, and I happen to have a little bit of knowledge and facility around it. But there are other religious books that also maintain this patriarchy, and it's really had a devastating impact on how men and women are able to be together in society and culture. And one of the scariest things is when a man's power is upheld by a woman, even when that man who is in power has no business being in power. Oh, this is so true, Chrissy. Many people would listen to me, Michael, before they would listen to her because she's a woman, even about woman topics like menstrual cycle. That's so true. Like we're supposed to be the authorities. It's just automatically thought that we're the authorities on anything. It's crazy. Well, you may be, you and many other men, Andy, although you don't believe in it, the patriarchy, it does exist. It's definitely happening here in our modern age, and it has because it came from somewhere, and we experience it today. And I mean, I could try to convince you, but I don't want to try to do that. I think if we just look closely at some of the different things that make men have more privilege over women simply because they're men, that's one place you can find the patriarchy. Patriarchy doesn't just mean, I'm the king. You know what I mean? Yeah, men suffer in many, many different ways. And by the way, there's a video that I would love to share with y'all about this. And I think patriarchy has to do with some of the ways that men's issues are overlooked completely. So there are some, I'll share the video here in a little bit, but here's what's interesting. When it comes to men's issues, right, exactly, suicide rates. I was just going to mention that. Suicide rates. Men don't get care for our emotional issues, and therefore we have a higher suicide rate. Well, as a patriarchy would say, buck up, man, stiff upper lip, right? Toughen up. Men don't cry. That's the patriarchy in action. Now, I can't prove it, but I could say it. I want to say that because we have such high suicide rates amongst men, that our emotions are very rarely even acknowledged, much less treated. So why is that? I mean, that's an issue we have to deal with. And let me pull this video up real quick. And this is a good example of what you're talking about exactly, Andy. And it does lead to this conversation. Where is it at? This is a good one. It's called Meeting the Enemy. Listen to this one. This is very good. 18 to 30-year-old women earn more than men. Is that true? Where do you get that statistic? I'd like to see that. Give me just a second. I'm gonna put this up. Let's watch this real quick. And you tell me. And then let's have a conversation about this.
In 2013, I decided to meet my enemies. I was a 27-year-old award-winning documentary filmmaker and a proud feminist. And I was determined to expose the dark underbelly of the men's rights movement. At that point, all I knew of the men's rights movement was from what I read online, that it's a misogynistic hate group actively working against women's equality. While the vast majority of my previous work was about women's issues, I directed documentaries about reproductive rights, single motherhood, and the need for more girls to get into STEM education. So when I learned that no one had ever documented the men's rights movement in a film before, I saw it as an opportunity to continue fighting for women's equality by exposing those preventing it. So for 1 year, I traveled North America, meeting the leaders and followers of the men's rights movement. I spent anywhere from 2 hours up to 8 hours interviewing each individual men's rights activist, also known as MRA. And I filmed 44 people total. And there's an important rule in documentary filmmaking. As an interviewer, you do not interrupt. So I'm asking questions, and I'm getting their full life story. And in the moment, I didn't realize it. But now looking back, I can see that while I was conducting my interviews, I wasn't actually listening. I was hearing them speak, and I knew the cameras were recording. But in those moments of sitting across from my enemy, I wasn't listening. What was I doing? I was anticipating. I was waiting to hear a sentence, or even just a couple of words in succession that proved what I wanted to believe, that I had found the misogynist, the ground zero of the war on women. A couple of times I thought I had it. There was one men's rights activist that said to me, "Just walk outside and look around. Everything you see was built by a man." Ooh, his statement felt anti-women. I felt my jaw clench, but I sat quietly, as a documentarian should, while removing all the space between my upper and lower molars. After my year of filming, I was reviewing the 100 hours of footage I had gathered, replaying and transcribing it, which, believe me when I say, no one will ever listen to you more than someone who transcribes your words. You should write that down. So I was typing out every word meticulously, and through that process, I began to realize that my initial knee-jerk reactions to certain statements weren't really warranted, and my feeling offended didn't hold up to intense scrutiny. Was that statement about men having built the skyscrapers and the bridges anti-women? I thought, well, what would be the gender reverse scenario? Maybe a feminist saying, "Just look around. Everyone you see was birthed by a woman." Wow, that's a powerful statement. And it's true. Is it anti-male? I don't think so. I think it's acknowledging our unique and valued contributions to our society. Well, luckily, while I was making the Red Pill movie, I kept a video diary, which ended up tracking my evolving views. And in looking back on the 37 diaries I recorded that year, there was a common theme. I would often hear an innocent and valid point that a men's rights activist would make, but in my head, I would add on to their statement a sexist or anti-woman spin, assuming that's what they wanted to say but didn't. So here are two examples of how that would go. A men's rights activist, an MRA, would say to me, "There are over 2,000 domestic violence shelters for women in the United States, but only one for men. Yet multiple reputable studies show that men are just as likely to be abused." I would hear them say, "We don't need 2,000 shelters for women. They're all lying about being abused. It's all a scam." But in looking back on all the footage I'd gathered of men's rights activists talking about shelters, and all the blogs they've written, and the video live streams they posted on YouTube, they're not trying to defund women's shelters, not at all. All they're saying is that men can be abused too, and they deserve care and compassion. Second example, a men's rights activist would say to me, "Where is justice for the man who was falsely accused of raping a woman? And because of this accusation, he loses his college scholarship and is branded with the inescapable title of rapist." I would hear them say, "A woman being raped isn't a big deal." It's as if I didn't hear the word falsely accused of rape. All I heard was he was accused of rape. Of course, rape is a big deal, and all the men's rights activists I met agreed it is a horrible thing to have happened to anyone. I eventually realized what they're saying is they're trying to add to the gender equality discussion who is standing up for the good-hearted, honorable man that loses his scholarship, his job, or worse yet, his children, because he's accused of something he absolutely did not do. Well, I couldn't keep denying the points they were making. There are real issues. But in my effort to avoid agreeing with my enemy completely, I changed from putting words in their mouth to acknowledging the issue, but insisting they are women's issues. So here are two examples of how that would go. A men's rights activist would say to me, "Men are far more likely to lose their child in a custody battle." And I would counter, "Well, because women are unfairly expected to be the caretaker, it's discrimination against women that women get custody more often." Yeah. I'm not proud of that. Second example, an MRA would say to me, men are roughly 78% of all suicides throughout the world. And I would counter with, but women attempt suicide more often. So ha. Ha? It's not a contest, but I kept making it into one. Why couldn't I simply learn about men's issues and have compassion for male victims without jumping at the opportunity to insist that women are the real victims? Well, after years of researching and fact-checking what the men's rights activists were telling me, there is no denying that there are many human rights issues that uniquely or disproportionately affect men. Paternity fraud uniquely affects men. The United States Selective Service, in the case of a draft, still uniquely affects men. Workplace deaths, disproportionately men. War deaths, overwhelmingly men. Suicide, overwhelmingly men. Sentencing disparity, life expectancy, child custody, child support, false rape allegations, criminal court bias, misandry, failure to launch, boys falling behind in education, homelessness, veterans issues, infant male genital mutilation, lack of parental choice once a child is conceived, lack of resources for male victims of domestic violence. So many issues that are heartbreaking if you are the victim or you love someone who is the victim of any one of these issues. These are men's issues, and most people can't name one because they think, well, men have all the rights, they have all the power and privilege. But these issues deserve to be acknowledged. They deserve care, attention, and motivation for solutions. Before making the Red Pill movie, I was a feminist of about 10 years, and I thought I was well-versed on gender equality issues. But it wasn't until I met men's rights activists that I finally started to consider the other side of the gender equality equation. It doesn't mean I agreed with all that they said, but I saw the immense value in listening to them and trying to see the world through their eyes. I thought if I could get my audience to also listen to them, it could serve as a rung on the ladder, bringing us all up to a higher consciousness about gender equality. So in October 2016, the film was released in theaters, and articles and critic reviews started to roll in. And that's when I experienced how engaged the media is in groupthink around gender politics. And I learned a difficult lesson. When you start to humanize your enemy, you, in turn, may be dehumanized by your community. And that's what happened to me. Rather than debating the merit of the issues addressed in the film, I became the target of a smear campaign. And people who had never seen the movie protested outside the theater doors, chanting that it was harmful to women. It certainly is not. But I understand their mindset. If I never made this movie and I heard that there was a documentary screening about men's rights activists that didn't show them as monsters, I too would have protested the screenings or at least signed the petitions to ban the film because I was told that they were my enemy. I was told that men's rights activists were against women's equality. But all the men's rights activists I met support women's rights and are simply asking the question, why doesn't our society care about men's rights? Well, the greatest challenge I faced through this whole process, it wasn't the protests against my film, and it wasn't how I was treated by the mainstream media, even though it got pretty disgusting at times. The greatest challenge I faced was peeling back the layers of my own bias. It turns out I did meet my enemy while filming. It was my ego saying that I was right and they were subhuman. It's no secret now that I no longer call myself a feminist, but I must clarify, I am not anti-feminist, and I am not a men's rights activist. I still support women's rights, and I now care about men's rights as well. However, I believe if we want to honestly discuss gender equality, we need to invite all voices to the table. Yet this is not what is happening. Men's groups are continually vilified, falsely referred to as hate groups, and their voices are systematically silenced. Do I think either movement has all the answers? No. Men's rights activists are not without flaws, and neither are feminists. But if one group is being silenced, that's a problem for all of us. If I could give advice to anyone in our society at large, we have to stop expecting to be offended, and we have to start truly, openly, and sincerely listening. That will lead to a greater understanding of ourselves and others, having compassion for one another, working together towards solutions because we all are in this together. And once we do that, we can finally heal from the inside out. But it has to start with listening. Thank you for listening.
Yeah. Yeah. That was so good. I mean, one of the things that I did as I was preparing for this was I was attempting to hear both sides of this conversation, and I didn't expect that one. I didn't expect to see this video to meet, but it definitely had an impact on how I look at this multi-layered problem that we're all facing. And it's one thing to say that, there's no such thing as a patriarchy, and there's no such thing as a matriarchy or feminism or any of the other things. And it's another thing to really get that we're talking about people. We're talking about real people who are having real issues that, because of what I call the patriarchy, are just not addressed. They're not important. Or it's not that they're not important, they're not held as important. Let me say it that way. And they are important. They're extremely important. When we hear a message like this, like I'm cut, I'm feeling it in my body right now. It makes me want to cry, because I know that there are men out there today, especially men who have come back from war. Something like 22 soldiers returning from war every day. I'm sorry, let me say it this way. Something like 22 soldiers a day take their lives because of what they experienced in war. These are real issues. These are real issues. And war, in my opinion, is almost always because of the patriarchy. Unless it has a real social reason, and and we know that most wars aren't. They're about resources or oil. What's that about? So I don't want to get into that. I really don't. This is a heavy topic, as you can tell, and I'm very passionately moved to do something about it. And yes, I do. I actually do want to have a watch party. Chrissy, let's figure out how to do that. This would be a good idea to have a watch party for that. And we'll schedule it. We'll schedule it the next time that we don't have a normal thing going on. I think that would be great. And let me see here. Let me get not that. Let me get rid of that. There we go. And I think it would be a lot of really good conversation to have around this topic. Thank you, Andy, for really, because you made that portion, that part that I just shared with everybody. I was going that direction, but you really brought it home. Thank you for that. I know this is a situation that we all find ourselves in, and one of the things that I don't ever want to do is, alienate or call anyone out or anything. And yet at the same time, I also want to make sure that this information is like available and readily available. I also watched Jordan Peterson. Now, Jordan Peterson is one of those people who just shot to stardom in a very short period of time because he had a lot of controversial ideas. And I agree with some of his ideas, and I disagree with many of his ideas. And he also comes from a place of wanting to understand, what the evidence is, and what it says. And for that, I respect him. I have a huge amount of respect for that. Other things are things that I get it. It's like, yeah, what are you going to do? How do you change this? Like, you're just going to come in and just wipe it all out and then change it all, who's responsible for this patriarchy thing? Who can we go and label, you're a patriarch? We're going to take you down. Like, how do you do that? Because that's not what it is. It's not that. It's a culture. It is embedded in the way that we raise our children. It's embedded in the way that we have organized our society and the way that our religions are run and the way that, like, all these things are happening. Political, societal, all of these things have some influence on this thing that we have just resigned ourselves to say, well, that's just the way it is. So he's a very important voice in this mix of things. And I do have a video that I want to share because I think it's important that you hear all the sides of this topic. And he does make some very good points. And he's very controversial. And so there are other people that I could pull from and say, here's some good points. Although I think because Jordan Peterson is so controversial that it should be something that we talk about or we share, because you really do need to see it. It's important for us to understand. Yes, in England, the patriarchy was and is huge, and you had a female prime minister, a queen, and the head of police. Absolutely, yeah. And yet the patriarchy still has a place in England, as it does in America and the West. So I'm going to go and look this up real quick, but yeah, isn't it weird? It's really strange. And if there were anything that you could see, Andy, in how the patriarchy has sort of shaped your belief systems or your, how you grew up, share that with us. I'm not from England, and so your perspective would be very important to hear about. Ah, your mom ruled your house. Yeah. Here it is. I found it. And was your father involved? You didn't have your dad there? No? I have a quick question for you on this one, Andy. Did your mother ever say to you, boys don't cry? Don't cry. Boys don't cry. Right. Interesting. My mom never said that to me either. She would just hold me and I would cry into her, into her shoulder or whatever. And I really didn't have a father growing up either. I'm thankful for that. Thank you, Mom. for actually allowing me to have those kind of emotions. Thank you to my mom and to your mom. Thank you, Andy, for that. Okay, let me pull this up.
Well, we could also...
Here is Jordan Peterson, and he's talking about the patriarchy, and it's specifically talking about what are some of the ways that we can actually resolve this, and can we, and what are some things that we can do. And before we're done, I would like to put up that the couple of places that we can go to support women's groups, and also to ensure that we get that watch party set up. So stand by just a second. Let me pull this up for you. Here we go.
Say, like, look, there's a claim that the West is an oppressive patriarchy. And so that's actually true. The problem with the claim is that it's not just an oppressive patriarchy. And there's a big difference between something being completely something and something being partly something. Because one of the things you might point out is that you can look at human history anywhere, and what you see is a complete bloody nightmare, right? It's death and struggle and privation and war and horror everywhere, with some progress, some ability of us to pull ourselves out of the mire, and the West is the same. There's plenty of catastrophe in our past, and of all sorts, and I think it's necessary to know that. But then it's necessary to separate the wheat from the chaff. One of the things I see with readers who are unsophisticated and intellectually arrogant is they'll read someone great. Maybe they'll read Nietzsche, for example, and they'll find the odd thing that Nietzsche said that grates against their current moral sensibilities, whether they do that in context or out. And then they'll throw away the whole book. It's like, you don't throw away the whole book. It was Nietzsche. You don't throw away the book. He's like 1 in a billion. You read it carefully and you think, well, okay, no to that. But yes to this. And you do the same thing with Dostoevsky, and you do the same thing with Tolstoy. You do the same thing with the great writers of the past that have been passed down to us. You read intelligently. You separate the wheat from the chaff, right? And you gain wisdom that way. Well, you do the same when you look at your own history. It's like, well, of course it's a bloody nightmare. What do you expect? It's like, what's your point? We're going to burn it down and then we're going to have something better as a consequence? Well, not so easily, not so quickly. Maybe we read our history carefully and we think, okay, well, what did we get right? Well, what did we get right? Well, the sovereignty of the individual, that's pretty good. The fact that you have right to property, that's pretty good. You can argue about the limits on that, but you don't want someone just taking your purse. It's helpful that there are things that you can earn and own. The dignity of the individual, that's another one. The innocence before the law, God, that's a miracle that we ever came up with that idea. I can't believe that idea exists, because in most cultures it's like, well, you might be guilty, okay, you're dead. Because, well, that's easier. You might be guilty. Why go through all the trouble? There's plenty of people where you came from. It's like the trouble of presuming your innocence. It's innocent. It's even hard for you to do that for yourself. And the idea that each person has an intrinsic worth regardless of their, externalities, let's say. That's another idea that's a complete miracle. It's like, what are we going to do? We're going to throw all that away with the statement that we live in an oppressive patriarchy. And then we're going to be left with nothing. And what good is that? Well, how about we look at our history and we take responsibility for it? We think, okay, well, here's some things that need to be fixed. There's plenty of them, right? There's plenty of them for each of us to fix. And we'll go fix them. And maybe then we can atone for the bloodiness of our history and for our so-called unearned privilege, some of which all of us have. And that would be good. That would be part of the adventure of your life too. And that's a far more sensible and wise approach to the diagnosis of what's wrong with the West than, well, it's an oppressive patriarchy and it should be overthrown, or whatever that current low resolution and resentful ideology happens to be. And there's something to be said for a bit of humility as well. Mm-hmm. It's like, Really, you really think that you're capable of making large-scale social transformations and getting it right, do you? You really think that? You're 25, you're 30, you're 40, I don't care, you know? What makes you think you're smart enough to pull off something like that? It's very, very difficult, very, very, very difficult to take a system that works not too badly and to do anything to it that doesn't make it worse, much less to radically reconstitute it and make it better. That's really hard. So, you know, if you're upset about your culture, well, maybe you could think of some small ways that are local that you could go out and improve it. Well, I think you should start with yourself, because, well, then you're only harming yourself and you're not a bad person to practice on. And then you could extend that to your family. Well, at least you suffer for the consequences of your own experiments that way, rather than having someone else do it. And then maybe you can work on bringing a little more harmony into your family. And maybe you can get a job and see if you're any good at that. And then if you manage those three things halfway respectably, well, then you could dare to put a toehold out into the broader community and think, maybe I have an idea here that we could tentatively attempt that might make some small thing slightly better that we could measure carefully and assess. And that would be your contribution. And maybe you get real good at that, you know. So by the time you're 50 or 60 and you have a solid life behind you, you're actually capable of generating large-scale improvements carefully.
So that was a short. It's really interesting to me how, let me get this, turn this off right here. How do I take that off? I think that's how you do it. There we go. Okay, I'm back. So that was a short. And he raises some really good points here that I think are valuable, and I think he also misses some points here, or a point. And my point, and the point that I think he misses, is that things that are obviously wrong should be radically changed very quickly. Yes, there would be an experiment in the sense that, you know, you could take it very slowly and be the change you want to see in the world, be the Gandhi, right? Be the change you want to see in the world, and slowly moving through the list of things that he mentioned, you know, doing this and doing that and getting a job and seeing if you can do that well, manage that well, and then moving on. But there's some things in society that are obviously horrific and should change. And social justice is one space that we find that happening in. And I sense and see that there's a patriarchy involved. Corruption. Much of the patriarchy can be seen in corruption, where you see that happening. Like it's also called, what is it? The good old boys club. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, Andy. The good old boys club. I remember this when I was in the Navy, and we had a group of guys that, if they liked you, you could be involved in a lot of very cool aspects of our, especially on our Navy base. It was called the Good Old Boys Club, and you know, there were some chiefs and some other people involved, but you get preferential treatment because you're a man. And so those are some obvious areas in which, yeah, we could make changes really quickly. So in that sense, yeah, I have that disagreement with him. But all the other things that he's mentioning, really, do you really think that you could make change and create something better than we currently have? Yeah, I think we could. If we put our heads together, I think we could. I really do. And it needs to be measured. It needs to be, and it needs to be identified. So perhaps where we start is identifying what is the patriarchy, putting definition to it, and understanding it clearly and being intelligent, and really making changes, being committed to impacting our culture in a way that has one of the things that changes. Boy, I'm really getting caught up on my words. Being an impact on society and our culture in a way that really does have this change in a real effective way. Because we don't need the patriarchy in order to be a thriving society. Yes, it is. It can be defined as an oppressive patriarchy. And the ones who benefit from it, quite frankly, you and I, Andy, we benefit from it, whether we know it or not. Like it's just there. So it starts with us, and I think we could do something about it. And if we're intelligent enough, one of the ways that I do is I absolutely adore and honor women. This is one of my ways of working the patriarchy out of me, and I still catch myself doing it. I still catch myself doing things that are oppressive and holding not just women but other men back, and that's patriarchy too. I think I described that a little earlier, an experience I recently had. Jordan is definitely he's one of those people who's got a great mind and thinks quite frankly out of the box. Oh man. So come on, Andy, you haven't benefited at all in your entire life. I think in that particular instance, yeah, you probably didn't get a job because of that, because of the number of women they had to employ. That's possible, yeah, and likely in some cases, but we have benefited in many ways. When you get that job, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, you're going to make a little more money than she would. And by the way, this is not a discussion in which, who's got more privilege than the other. We have it. We definitely have it. And I want to share with you an experience I personally had that is not about, the differences in privilege, but just the differences in awareness. Okay. Andy, that may be true in the UK, but in the States, that's actually not true. I had the same job as a woman that worked with me. In fact, she was actually a team lead, and I was on her team, and she got paid for what she did less than I got paid. Now I negotiated that, but the point is that I did get paid more. So let me give you let's standardize this right here, because this happened to me within the last 10 years. I've done a bit of personal growth work, and I took a course by Allison Armstrong, who used to teach it, I think she still teaches it. It was called Understanding Women, and it's a co-ed program where men and women can both be in the program. Usually, what she does is mostly women are in a program, and she teaches women how to understand men, and she's brilliant at it. In fact, go to AllisonArmstrong.com and check out all of her programs. They're amazing. She loves men. And when you hear her speak, you can really hear and feel this in her conversations. So here's what happened. I was in a room of probably around I'd say 300 people. It was a weekend, and she began to ask the question. She said, men, I just want to ask this. How many of you men in the last 30 days have felt like your life was at stake, like you were in danger and your life was at stake? And, a couple hands went up. And she said, okay, let's take it to the last week. In the last week, how many of you men have felt like your life was in danger, or something like that? And a few more hands went up. Or actually, no, less hands went up. It was the opposite. Less hands went up. And then she said, okay, well, let's just look at it this way. In the last 24 hours, how many of you men have felt like your lives were in danger in any way? And almost no hands went up. And I was following along. I was like, okay, what's going on? So then she says, okay, women, how many women in the last 6 months, she went out further, felt like your life was in danger? And more hands of the women went up than of the men. And then she said, okay, let's take it to the last 30 days. And still, most of the room of women's hands had gone up. And then she said, okay, well, let's look at the last week. And a few less hands went up, but there was still a good portion of the room. And then she said, how about in the last 24 hours, where you felt like you were in danger, or maybe your life was in danger, and a good portion of the hands went up, many more than the men's hands. And then she said, let's look at the last hour. How many of you women felt like you were endangered, or you felt unsafe in some way in the last hour? And many of their hands went up. Now, this doesn't mean that women are more in danger than men. You're right, that's a perception. But that's women's perception. And men don't perceive things that way. But here's where I want to bring the humanity to this, okay? This is an experience, a human experience that's happening. And how would your nervous system feel if that was your reality, where you felt like, wow, I could be in danger here because you're female? For the most part, women are raped more than men. That's a reality, but not even that. That's just the perception. That's just the personal experience of women. Okay, it's a human thing. And when I saw that happen, being in that room that day, it changed me. I didn't say, well, that's just a perception. I said, wow, what's that like for you? And the woman I was dating at the time, she was with me in that room, and she had her hand up. And I was like, wow, really? You really felt like that? And she said, yeah. And I said, wow, this is really, really an important moment for me, because I didn't know that. Like, I just didn't know that. And so I'm very careful nowadays to ensure that I come across as someone who is safe, especially to women. You know? So this is an important thing to note, that these are human experiences, and yeah, they're important, and yeah, they're real. And we should be, I don't want to should on anybody. Let's look at it in terms of that, rather than, yeah, but I have a defense in my position. Like, I don't want to defend your position. I don't want to defend my position. I'm just giving you some information, though, that says, hey, these are humans. These women are having this experience, and I didn't know that. Just like we watched the last video, or not this last video, the one before that, where she was talking about, these are men's issues. Like, that shifted something. So the conversation is important to have. The conversation is very important to have. And the patriarchy, to me, seems to be the culprit. And so that's why I'm addressing it today. I really want to feel my way through this, but I also really want to have this conversation go out a little bit and have this with your family, with your with sons and daughters and wife and other people in your life who, or lovers, whoever you are engaged with in society. Like, we're really trying to get this sorted out, and to have an experience of each other that's healthy and whole. So that's why I'm bringing it up. Yeah, absolutely. It's so important that we get each other. I mean, one of the things that Laurie and I really spend a lot of time doing in our Extraordinary Lovers experience is talking about, how do we return to love? We can spend a lot of time defending our positions. We can spend a lot of time showing how we're right or the other person is wrong. What Laurie and I do that's extraordinary is we spend a lot of time figuring out how do we return to love. How can I love you in a way that you really get that I care about you and that I honor you and you matter to me? That's what I'm about, you know? So that's what my goal is here, is to find out how do we take this thing called the patriarchy and say, wait a minute, rather than that, what if we just started to learn how to return to love and help each other deal with the issues that are men's issues and that are women's issues? Like, how do we get these issues dealt with? I mean, I was shocked when I found out that there are 2,000, There are 2,000, centers, centers for women who have been abused. Like, what are they called? And there's one in the country for men. And I thought, how is that even possible? Because men are as likely to be abused as women are. How is that even possible?
We have a new name,
Blew my mind.
coronavirus. The World Health Organization has officially called it...
Turning that off. I don't know where that came from. Anyway, so that's what I'm really interested in. It's important to me to get to that space where we're actually dealing with it. Thank you so much for saying so. I appreciate that. So does anybody, let's see here. Let's put that email back. Oh yeah, you're completely welcome, everyone. Love you. Thank you, Andy, for saying so. Is there anybody that has any questions or maybe comments about how, like, especially about how do you think we could do this? How do you think we could sort that out? Really curious to hear about that. Super curious. Yeah, you're definitely safe here. Absolutely. Well, trying to find this last video. There we go. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And thank you for saying, yeah, you're always safe here. And it's hard sometimes. Yeah, you're right, Chrissy. It's hard sometimes. I feel nervous speaking about this as well, because I know that I could alienate people and alienate people from the channel. I certainly don't want to do that. But it's a hard topic, and it's definitely, but it's worthy of our attention. Especially when we're talking about, being in a relationship. And if you're growing a family, if you're building a family, how do you want that family to approach adulthood with some of the already always understood, like that's just the way it is. Sorry, honey. No, I would rather that we raise our children to be aware and conscious and empathetic and compassionate to others for what they're experiencing. And so that's what we're up to. That's what we're up to here. Yeah, thank you so much, Andy. Thank you for sharing that. It's so true. We do have to have a difference of opinion. It's okay. And bringing it back to love is how that works. Yeah. Chrissy, thank you so much for being my support on this TV show. I really adore you, and I appreciate you, and I want to say it in front of everybody because you really do deserve the honor for the work that you do. And I appreciate you. And I appreciate I didn't see Careza today or Chris. I don't know if maybe they're just being silent or if they were just hanging out in the back going, I wonder what this is all about. But so good to see you all. Yeah. So, wait a minute before I go. First of all, let me send you love from Laurie. She texts and she says, send my love. So she's giving her love to you right now. And I also want to let you know about an upcoming program that we have. Yes. Hi, Chris. Good to see you. So we're having another Extraordinary Lovers experience. It's April 24th and 25th. And we're really excited because we've got a lot of people already enrolled. And we would love to have you there. So if you would, Chrissy, could you put that link into the chat for us? But the Extraordinary Lovers Experience, what it is it's 2 days. It's a weekend where we take you through what we call the 3 thresholds of love. And the first threshold, of course, is the love of self. It's how you love yourself. And then from that, we're beginning to do some healing and some creating and some returning of love, return to love for the self. And then from there, we then go and we start to look at what does it mean to have that love overflow out of yourself to your lover. Because I really believe that you've got to fill yourself up first. And then you can, it's hard to give love to someone else when it's not happening here. Does that make sense? So that's what the first thing is. But we want to talk not just love, extraordinary love. How do you really make it juicy and good for yourself? And then we move into loving your partner out of that love. So that self-love can be then given to your partner. And then when we've done all that, and we talk about juicy love and everything else and the seduction and ways that you can touch each other and really harness that sexy love and take that love and then begin to manifest what it is that you want in your life. And that is where we go into the love that manifests. So there are 3 thresholds of love. The first one is self-love, love of your partner, and then love that manifests. And Chrissy, you're coming with, we love you. You're going to be there with us. Yeah, you know what, Chris? We have changed it a little bit. It's a little bit more formatted, but you should join us if you can. You know what? I'll send you a link, and we'll talk about, because you'd be reviewing it. We'll talk about how we can make that happen for you and John if you'd like to join us. I'll make sure that we connect with you around that. Let's see here, and if you use, I forget what it is. I think it's ELE. If you use the code ELE, I believe it's that right there. That code right there, you'll receive $100 off for the next week. It's only good for another week, but you'll get $100 off for the course. Now, Andy, I know that you're in the UK, and we're doing it. It starts at 9 a.m. Pacific time, which I think is 7 hours. I think it's 7 hours earlier than when you would start. So that would be the time zones you'd have to look at. But we would love to have you there if you could make that. And anyone else who wants to join us, do get in contact with us, and we will definitely, let's see here. I can share with you all the things that you need to know on how it all works and what we do. Now, what changed, Chris, is that we were just doing 2 days, which is a weekend. We were just doing the weekend. Now what we've done is we've expanded it. So what we've done is we've made it a weekend plus 4 weekly calls to do 2 things: to deliver a little more information, to kind of deepen it, but also to help integrate it into your life. So what you learn in the weekend, you'll be able to integrate over those 4 weeks. It's not quite the journey that we had with you. It's not quite that, but it's kind of a taste of that. And then we still have the journey. The journey is going to be coming up around, I think it's April 26th. We're going to be doing that. So if you've been through Extraordinary Lovers Experience before, you can go on to the journey. But you have to do Extraordinary Lovers Experience before you move on to the journey. So, but that's what's up and coming. We're really excited about it. We've made some really big changes and added a lot of things to it. We now have also some great materials that we are going to hand over to you, so you have them, so you can work with them, and be able to take what it is that we do into your life, into your relationships. It's not just for you and your partner. It's for you and your children. It's for you and your parents, if you're still if your parents are still alive and they're available to be in relating with, you can definitely use these techniques. And I don't like to call them tools. I call them practices. But you can take these practices into every area of life, including business. They work really well. So all of that, and a great big hug and kiss from Laurie from Austin, Texas. And I'm going to actually wrap up just a little bit early today because I don't have anything else to say. I don't want to drone on, you know what I mean? Droning on is like, oh. But thank you so much for being here with us today. Yes. You know what? We really enjoyed our time with you in St. Pete. It was a lot of fun. And we're going to be doing that again. We actually have the retreat coming up in December. And I can get you more information about that as well, Chris. The retreat is happening in September in Mexico. We're actually going to be able to fly or to travel here pretty soon. So we're going to do that. And then we're also doing another Extraordinary Lovers Live. You can join us in Germany coming up in, I want to say July or July. We're going to be in Germany. And then I think in June, we're going to Toronto. That's still a conversation we're having. But anyway, there's a lot happening. And I don't want to drone on. So whatever that you can do, especially, now let me make sure I put this in here, especially for, being the change that you want to see in the world when it comes to the patriarchy and fairness and really in living our lives in ways that honor, regardless of gender and regardless of all the things, but that you really do have that love in your heart and that it supports you and also the people in your life. And maybe make some changes in the world where it doesn't always seem so fair. And here's one place that you can go, timesupnow.org. It's a good organization. I will send, hold on, let me go and get that video again. I told you I would. I told you I would give you the link, and I don't want to be a liar. So let me go back here. Here it is. Her name is Cassie J. And let me make sure. Hold on just a second. I'm going to share this link with you. So that TED Talk was with Cassie J. She's the one who produced the movie The Red Pill. And we're going to do a watch party around that. We're going to figure out how to get it. I think we could probably go to her website and purchase it and download it, and then we can do a watch party that way. Although the watch party probably won't be on Twitch because that could get us banned. What we might do is open up or have a Zoom call where you're welcome to join us on our Zoom call, and then we'll share the video that way, free of charge. I think it would be just a great time for us to all get together, hang out, drink some wine, and watch a really good documentary on the men's rights activists movement. So with love and appreciation for all of you, and I hope we by the way, I got to let you know, next week is going to be a really important week. Next week, we're going to have Kimmy Inch on the program, and she is a master is she a dominatrix, Chrissy? Is that right? Am I getting it right or am I getting it wrong? Please tell me. She is a dominatrix and a BDSM. Okay. She is an expert in BDSM, and she has multiple clients, and she does trainings in the Austin area, actually all over the world. And she is amazing. You are going to love her. She's gorgeous. She's funny. She is extremely passionate about the work she does. And she is clearly and definitely an expert in this field. And we would love for you to come back and learn a little bit more about some of the things that Laurie and I like to do, which is play. And so sometimes we break out the masks and the riding crops and the handcuffs, and we play. And it's part of keeping everything very interesting and juicy in our relationship. So We'll see you next week, same time. Laurie will be back, and we'll have Kimmy with us, and of course we'll have Chrissy with us, Exo Worthy Warrior. So look forward to seeing you next week. Yes. Oh, wow! Looking forward to that. You're going to send John on an errand. Well, it'll be recorded in case he wants to watch it. So, by the way, you can go to our YouTube channel. This will go up on the YouTube channel here this weekend. You'll see this video posted there, and this is where our replays go. Oh, by the way, our replays are always found here on Twitch. So if you go to twitch.tv/Extraordinary Lovers TV, you can come back here and watch them. Now, they only stay up for 2 weeks, which is why I recommend that you go to our YouTube channel, which again is Extraordinary Lovers TV. You can find us on YouTube, and that's where you can watch all of our backlog of, or archive, I guess is the right word, of videos. And you can also see some of the clips that we put up there. We put up a lot of clips so that they're, a little bit shorter, but they're also good to watch. And yeah, we'll definitely see you next week. And please join us. And when you go to YouTube, please do hit the subscribe button and the little bell that lets you know when a clip goes up. And we'll see you next week, everybody. You guys have a wonderful week. We appreciate you so much. And we'll see you again.